Hey everyone, my name's Jackson, alongside my good friend Brock, who is guest hosting here on the Hardware Podcast. Today we are going to be previewing Week 8, discussing a little Heisman talk, going over what we saw last week in Week 7. But Omar is, as we all know, in the some time to Uncle Sam and the army, and he's doing some badass army stuff, I'm sure. So only the fun stuff. No paperwork, no meetings, anything like that. Just only what you see in the movies. So Brock is kind enough to step in today. So how you doing, my man?
I'm doing good, man. It's been a while since we did a show together. Excited to be doing it with you and wishing the best to Omar and whatever he's up to with the
Right?
military.
Yeah, who knows? Who knows what he's doing
Mhm.
out there? But first of all, Brock, you do a lot of cool stuff. I see a lot of your stuff on Twitter, X now, whatever it's called. Tell us where we can find your stuff and how we can listen to you a little bit more.
I appreciate it. Yeah, so you can find me at MNS Today. That's on Twitter or X, whatever you want to call it. Follow me, I follow back as long as the whole limit restriction thing doesn't come up. So I work for a company called Team MBS Media, and I am one of the main college football writers on there. I also cover the Raiders and the Cardinals for them as well, and I dabble in a little bit in their entertainment section. So if you want to check out my articles, check it out there. I also work for Rams Wire. So if you're a big Los Angeles Rams fan, you can check out my work. I just dropped an article talking about Kyrie Williams and how Williams might be the running back for the future for the Rams. And then I also do a show with a good friend of mine, Bill Carroll. We do the college football forecasts, our weekly prediction show that you can catch every Friday. We go live. And then if you guys fancy any college football recap show, we do the last word every Sunday morning at 7 Pacific in the morning. And then that would be 10 East Coast time. So check those things out all on YouTube, all on Team MBS Media, and then on Rams Wire as well.
I love it, man. Nice. You're in other words, you're a busy guy. So, and you know a lot about this great sport. So, hey, that's really all it takes. I love it, man. Well, hey, we'll go ahead. We'll break in just some quick casual thoughts about what you saw in Week 7, man. Always love getting your perspective. So I'll let you lead on this one.
Yeah, no. What I really enjoy about this time of the year in general is that when the weather starts to cool, the race for the college football playoffs starts to heat up, and we saw some really big games that might have determined or at least eliminated some teams up to this point. One of the games I want to touch on is obviously the big one, which is Oregon Washington. A great back and forth matchup where Michael Penix Jr. really showed himself to be the quarterback that a lot of us who are diehard of the sport have been saying, but a lot of the more casual fans haven't had an opportunity to really appreciate yet. Penix, along with his receivers Jalen Polk, Jalen McMillan, and Romo Dunze, have just lit up college football this entire year on the main stage. They did it once again against a very underrated Oregon defense, and Washington is finally starting to get the respect they deserve. Unfortunately, at least in my opinion, because when I do my top 25, which you can all check out on Team NBS Media, I don't have them pushing into the top four yet. I still have Oklahoma in there, who has a big win over Texas 2 weeks ago. They're on a bye last week. Florida State, who beat Syracuse handedly on Saturday. And I still got obviously Georgia and Michigan above them. However, Washington is pushing up into that top four. Another matchup that I thought was going to be a little bit closer because of the historic nature of upsets involving those two. Ohio State, Purdue. Ohio State took care of business pretty handily. Penn State had a really easy win against Massachusetts. They obviously play each other this weekend in what could be another college football playoff eliminator. Notre Dame absolutely smoked USC, which we'll get in. I know we'll probably get into for a little bit because I got Xavier Watson, defender, as one of my standout players of the week. And then the last game that I really want to just touch on real quick that I think helped clarify, at least clarify the picture of what how the season is going to come down to is Iowa's improbable victory over Wisconsin. The Hawkeyes right now sit at 6-1. Brian Ferentz is still under that 25-point mark in order to extend his contract, but the Hawkeyes look really impressive on defense. They could potentially be another team that plays spoiler. Once again, they play 6-1 right. They're 6-1 right now. They have a very easy schedule to end their season. There's a high probability they'll be 11-1 entering the Big Ten championship game. And should they be able to pull off the upset there, the Hawkeyes could be in the college football playoff. Lots going on. A lot of great games last week. Great games this week, and I just can't wait to talk about it.
My one concern with Iowa, and I'll touch on a few things here, but my one concern with Iowa, I believe they have, is it Minnesota this upcoming weekend? I can't
I
remember. I don't have
believe
the
so.
schedule in front of me. A great little nugget that I got from Reese Davis on the College Game Day podcast was that only Navy and Air Force have fewer passing yards than Iowa and Minnesota in FBS. What concerns me about that is Iowa doesn't have multiple ways to win. Like it's a very it's very one dimensional of their path to victory, and that's my concern. And that in how deep the Big Ten conference is this year, and how deep it's only going to get deeper from here on out. You have to have multiple ways to win, and that's a little concerning that they're just so one dimensional. So, but yes, Iowa, they're setting up. There is a very, very clear path for them to go to Lucas Oil this year, which is crazy. No one's really talking about it, so I appreciate you bringing that up. But we will touch on Oregon and Washington a little bit later for sure too. With Notre Dame, man, they just looked dominant in every dimension of that game. In all three phases, they just outplayed USC thoroughly. And that's what was surprising to me. I thought that if Notre Dame won, that it was going to be because of their defense. And of course the defense played a part in it, but on special teams, on offense, they really looked better in all three parts of the game, which is hard to do when you're coming off of three very emotional wins or losses in a row with no bye week, no, cupcake opponent or easier opponent. Man, to have four games like that in a row and then to pull it off in such a dominant fashion in the fourth is very impressive. But yeah, man, we'll go ahead. We'll hop into Pittsburgh over Louisville too. Man, what a shock that was. The only game more shocking, in my opinion, North Dakota winning in such a dominant fashion against North Dakota State. We haven't seen North Dakota State just be bullied and shoved around in a very long time. So that was surprising as well. But we'll move on to a little bit of our Heisman talk. There were three guys that I really want to, we'll make it four guys. Four guys I really wanted to talk about with you in depth, and then we'll touch on some others. Caleb Williams, Mike Penix, Bo Nix, and Dylan Gabriel. A little bit about JJ McCarthy and Jordan Travis and some of those guys. But we'll start off with Caleb Williams. Obviously, who's been the front runner all year, even after the Arizona near loss. And then this game, is this a Heisman eliminating performance in your opinion?
Not yet, but it's close.
Yeah.
Caleb Williams reminds me a lot of Jameis Winston. Sorry, after his Heisman year, the year after, he took Florida State to the first ever college football playoff. And if you look back at all those games, it was Winston that dragged the Seminoles to that point. And that's how I feel about Williams. He's dragging USC so much that it's hindering his performances because he has to play outside of the structure of his offense in order to compensate for the lack of abilities on that defensive side of the football. He has to make throws that a quarterback shouldn't have to make as many times as he does. He has to make plays in ways that a quarterback shouldn't. And unfortunately, with Lincoln Riley's offense, it's too finesse to a point that is detrimental. And that's why I think that Williams needs to basically throw for averaging 360 yards for the rest of the season in order to have a remote chance of winning the Heisman again, which is not going to be easy because they play Utah this week, which has one of the best, if not the best defense in the Pac-12. His playmakers have not been to standard. When you lose a guy like Jordan Addison, yeah, it's tough, but you also have guys like Williams and Taj Washington and Brendan Rice and all those playmakers. Bringing in Marshawn Lloyd from South Carolina. I think Austin Jones is still healthy. So the fact that he's had to do so much is just detrimental to his Heisman candidacy. And like I mentioned earlier with James, it also reminds me of Bryce Young last year who played lights out, but because he wasn't able to have the weapons around him play at the level that they needed to, I think that right now, when you look at least for me personally, my top five, he's five without a doubt.
Yeah, I'll put it to you this way, in my opinion, at least, and if I had to vote, and thank God I don't, because there are a lot of people that watch this sport a lot more than me. Caleb Williams, it was not a performance that eliminates him going to New York, but it should eliminate him from winning, in my opinion. JJ McCarthy, if you throw 3 interceptions against a Bowling Green like JJ McCarthy, that's not really a game where even, I mean, if you lose, of course it's very, very bad, but you still could win that game, and it's no one, there aren't as many, sets of eyes on a Michigan Bowling Green, obviously, as there were for a USC Notre Dame. And it wasn't such a critical game to the year as it was for both these teams. So when you have 3 interceptions in the first half to really like set up and hand Notre Dame the W on a silver platter, so to speak, it's I think it eliminates a win, a Heisman win, in my opinion. So my main criticism of Caleb so far, like leading up to this game, was that he wasn't really like putting the team on his back, especially in the Arizona game and stuff like that, if that makes sense. Last week on Hardware, we talked about the distinguishment between not winning and losing, and how he was just kind of like almost like Aaron Rodgers was in that divisional round a couple of years ago in San Francisco. Was the example I used of how he's not winning the game, he's not losing it, but he's not putting his team on his back. And this loss on Notre Dame was really the first time that we've seen him like lose a game for the most part. USC's defense like really like played well, like for the most part, but definitely not the Swiss cheese defense that we've seen all year. They gave up 34 points, and remember, 14 of those points were from interceptions that got returned inside the red zone, inside like the 15-yard line. So you can't really hold that against them. They held Audric Estime to under 100 yards, and Sam Hartman to only 126 yards. Like, they played well, and that's really what Lincoln Riley has asked of his defenses. Always has been, hey, just don't let them score on every drive and we'll score the rest. And they held Notre Dame to really, you could argue, 20 points, and still they just could not outscore them. So I do want to take a minute and give credit to Notre Dame for everything that they had. I mean, like I mentioned already, they had the 10-min in South Bend. They had the biggest home game for Duke in a long time on the road, and they had a blowout loss in Louisville with Jack Harlow in attendance. And to make the reigning Heisman winner look like he was just not a good decision maker is impressive. So Notre Dame, like I said, won in all 3 phases. The only downside, I don't really know if they still found an identity of who they want to be on offense. But you know what? Who cares if you find an identity or not when you beat your rival by 28 points? So really doesn't matter. So yeah, but I want to give credit to Notre Dame too. We'll move on to our next guy that I think has jumped up to be the front runner, really, Mike Penix. Man, the moment, at least, that I felt like I knew that Penix might like spearhead the Huskies to a win was really on that first drive. That it was an Oregon offsides that resulted in what was a free play, right? He didn't just chuck the ball haphazardly, knowing that an interception or an incompletion was really inconsequential. Man, he threw a dime into the breadbasket to Rome Odunze. That was like perfectly placed for a very large gain on the outside shoulder. I know the game is technically won on a missed field goal by Oregon right as time expired, but I have a hard time believing that Washington doesn't win that thing that goes into overtime. So I want to get your opinion on that game, and you've already talked a little bit about Penix and what he's accomplished all year, but I'll leave it.
They're actually, this was the prove it game for me, and I always have a little bit of concern when it comes to left-handed quarterbacks that can't fire the ball in there repeatedly. Like, basically, if you don't have the arm strength of Mike Vick, I have some major concerns of left-handed quarterbacks, and that's probably because of what we saw from Tua during his first couple years in the league. Now, obviously, he has the weapons around him to fit his play style, but that's now he's year 4 at this point. So that's why I had a little bit of concern about Penix Jr. coming into this game. I thought Dan Lanning was really going to tighten up his defense, really create smaller windows in order for Penix to fit the ball in. And guess what? He did, and Penix still fit it in. This was one of the most impressive performances I've seen throughout the year. I think that this has put him 1 foot into winning the Heisman. the last thing that he would need to do is have a really good game against Caleb Williams when Washington plays USC. And should he do that, I think that he's going to seal the Heisman without a doubt. I don't really see another player in the country right now eclipsing him in terms of what he's been able to do. I think that he has the recipe around him in terms of offensive system, offensive playmakers, and offensive line to win the Heisman. He has incredible abilities. He has incredible decision making, incredible heart to come back from all those injuries that he suffered. And let's not forget what he did at Indiana. I mean, we have seen him perform against defenses in the Pac-12 and in the Big Ten at a program that wasn't really known for football. So he has really just impressed me on this year. I think for sure he's going to be a first round selection. I think he's kind of locked that in. And when you go up against the Alabama Golden Boy and Bo Nix, who everybody that I've been talking to has been high on this entire year, and you do what you did against him, I mean, what else is there to say? You just put yourself in the driver's seat for financial success, personal success, and for Washington to win the Pac-12 and also into the college football playoff.
Absolutely no. There's nothing I disagree with. Like you pretty much touched everything there. I will say, and this is not a knock on Mike Penix. This is just an unknown, one of the few unknowns left at this point in the season for him. We haven't really seen anyone rattle him yet, and I'm not really concerned about anyone doing that until until they get to the college football playoff. Because if anyone was going to do it, it was Oregon. All 20 touchdowns and all 3 interceptions have been thrown when the pocket was kept clean for him. And the 3 interceptions that he has thrown were actually thrown when he wasn't blitzed at all. So it's a very small sample size, only 43 attempts from when he's actually been under pressure. And I believe a 51% completion percentage. So that's really like the last unknown that we have left. Penix, like you mentioned with the arm strength, been a 96.4 deep ball grade by PFF. Which is the best of short, medium, and behind the line of scrimmage. So, man, he can sling that thing. So that's definitely not I think it is the arm strength that's just wicked. Like he's just a strong dude. I don't know how else to put it. He can throw stuff on a rope. So, Mike Penix has been phenomenal and will continue to be this year, hopefully.
Yeah. I just want to add real quick, if you don't mind. Yeah. What he does well that has really shocked me is the way he throws at anticipation. He sees openings before they even open up.
Yeah.
And that's very, very crucial. There's one game that I have kind of circled on watch outside this week at Arizona State, because like when everyone goes out to Arizona State, it's like this weird like thing about it. Actually, Arizona State plays at Washington, so please disregard what I said. But they play at Oregon State on November 18th. Oregon State has a very underrated defense on the
Oregon State for real. Yeah.
If Penix plays decent enough in that game, I think that it doesn't matter what he does in the Apple Cup. As long as Washington beats Washington State, he's gonna win the Heisman on the 18th of November. So that's just something I want everyone that's watching to kind of keep in mind. Should he put up average numbers, he's got the Heisman without a doubt. And that's when his Heisman moment is gonna really come into play.
I like that. That makes a lot of sense. And on the road, obviously, it plays even more when you're on offense. So
absolutely,
no, that makes sense. We'll move on to someone who is not that far off from being on par with Mike Penix, at least in this game, Bo Nix. Oregon was I think the better team won, but Oregon looked like a close second in that game, and I don't think that was a college football playoff eliminating performance for Oregon, or a Heisman eliminating performance for Bo Nix necessarily. I don't think he's going to win, but I absolutely could be a finalist in my opinion. So at Auburn, he reminded me a lot. Bo Nix reminded me a lot of like Drew Lock, where there were plays where he would look like he could be the number 1 overall pick, and then there were plays it was like, what did he see? What are you thinking in that moment? And since his transfer to Oregon in general, and particularly this year, he's really harvested more of the good throws and, more importantly, stamped out a lot of the bad ones. And to the point that the range and quality of play has really stayed near the top and is narrowed, where it can't be as bad as it once was on select plays at Oregon. But I'll get your thoughts on Bo Nix. Obviously, he definitely did not come close to outplaying Mike Penix, but he wasn't as far behind as a lot of losing quarterbacks are. So
Yeah, I want to preface this by saying Gus Malzahn is one of the most overrated offensive minds in all of college football, and you're really seeing it now. I think Gus Malzahn's inability to win with Bo Nix isn't on Nix; it's more on Malzahn. If you look at Malzahn's best seasons since he's become a head coach, it would be his first year when he went to the national championship game. He had Rhett Lashley as his offensive coordinator, one of the better offensive minds in all of college football, head coach at SMU. Bo Nix's best year, I believe Kenny Dillingham was the OC at Auburn, and now he's at Arizona State after doing great things with Dillingham last year when he was the OC at Oregon. If you look at Malzahn's best year at UCF, JJ Kine was offensive coordinator who has been doing wonders at Texas State after killing it at Incarnate Word a year ago. Had Nix had a proper offensive coordinator throughout his entire time at Auburn, we wouldn't have seen that second year regression from him. And what we're seeing from Bo Nix now, I think that he has a legitimate shot at being a really good NFL quarterback. Because if you look at the people outside of him, they don't really have an impressive offensive unit. I know people. I think Bucky Barnes' his name is. People are really high on him and Troy Franklin. They're good, but I don't see Oregon having a top 5 offensive unit. I have Washington over them. I have USC over them. I have Arizona over them. You can't even put at times Washington State over them, even though these past 2 weeks haven't looked real impressive. I think you put Bo Nix in this UCLA offense right now. UCLA is undefeated at this point. I think you put him in Arizona's offense. I think Arizona is undefeated at this point. I think that Bo Nix has been limited his entire career, and when you start putting playmakers around him, he's going to be even better than he is right now. And I think that if you switch the quarterbacks, Penix Jr. and Bo Nix, had Nix on Washington, Penix Jr. on Oregon, I think Washington wins by at least 10 points. That's not a knock against Penix Jr. That's just a testament to how good Nix is and how good Nix could be if he had better weapons around him. I agree with you. I don't think he's going to win the Heisman. I don't think this game was a Heisman eliminator either. I think he still makes the trip up to New York or wherever they have the ceremony. If you're Oregon right now, I know it's a tough loss, but it's just one loss. A lot of teams in the country have one loss right now. A lot of teams in this country will have one loss after these next 2 weeks. If you can kind of handle the storm up until that USC game and then get over the Trojans, I believe they play this year, you're going to face Washington again in the Pac-12 championship game, and the winner of that's going to the college football playoffs. So I think everything's looking up for Bo Nix. I think he's grossly underrated, as much as that pains me to say. And put some competent people around him and watch him just flourish.
And this is a road loss with a special teams error, which is about as cushy as a loss against you. This isn't Texas beating Alabama on the road, where your one loss for Alabama is a lot worse. So this is not the same. So yeah, you're absolutely right. This is only one loss. This isn't the end of the world. Man, I love what you said about being, if you put them on Arizona, they're undefeated. You put them at UCLA, he's undefeated. The closest we'll get to a Bo Nix, Jacob Cowing connection is unfortunately probably the Reese Senior Bowl. So, but man, would that be fun to watch if he just had a few more guys around him. So, I want to briefly touch on Dillon Gabriel too. If you look at the remaining schedule for Gabriel in Oklahoma, it really looks like his Heisman moment will have had to have come already in the Red River rivalry. I'm not saying it wasn't a strong moment or not like a Heisman worthy moment. I'm just reminding you that voters really have a short-term memory of the good and a long-term memory of the bad. So it doesn't, an early October phenomenal performance doesn't really help you as much as a mid to late November one. So I'll get your quick thoughts on Dillon Gabriel and just his path to being a Heisman finalist at the very least.
Yeah, so he has a very clear path to being a finalist, but this is very reminiscent of Tua and Kyler Murray like 5 or 6 years ago. Tua should have won the Heisman that year, but it was Kyler Murray that had a phenomenal performance. I believe it was in the Big 12 championship game against Texas that year that really helped solidify his candidacy and also then ended up winning it. So Dylan Gabriel, if it win, they play Texas again in the Big 12 championship game. Needs to have the same type of performance in order to win the Heisman. Yeah, it's just tough. He looks really impressive. He reminds me a lot of his dad. Because Garrett Gabriel back in the day at University of Hawaii was just a stud. He ran the triple option offense to just at elite level. Great passer, great runner of the football, and it's exactly what we see from his son at Red River. Oklahoma has the easiest schedule, I think, of any of the top 10 teams in the country to end out the season. So as long as they don't slip up, there's no reason why they shouldn't be in the College playoff, even if they lose in the Big 12 championship game. But again, he's gonna have to play really, really good in that championship game in order to even have a remote shot at winning the Heisman.
Something interesting that Dylan is probably going to see now that it's an established tendency by him. 12 of his 16 touchdowns have come from throwing inside the numbers. I always point back to the example of, when teams would play Lamar Jackson, be kind of a top hat defense, right? You're covering the whole width of the field, from like the 5 yards beyond the line of scrimmage and below. And then you're really covering like only inside the numbers when you go above that, just because it's proven that he can't really throw there as much. And so now that it's kind of established in that way, I'm curious if we're going to see more of like I said, like a top hat defense, especially against a lefty like him. So I don't know, just something to watch for. It's we're getting to the time of year, okay, where there's enough of a sample size on all of these guys for this year that we can really exploit a lot of the weaknesses, and maybe not all of, there's no way all of these guys are as perfect as we're making them out to be. So we're gonna see someone's weakness shown up. So for JJ McCarthy, Jordan Travis, Jaden Daniels, Drake May, there's still a lot of really good names on this list, and still a lot of quality quarterbacks. None of them really jump out to me like any of these guys. I think if JJ McCarthy wins it, it's going to be against Ohio State. Is really going to be, that has to be his Heisman performance. So we haven't seen that yet. Jordan Travis has I think you have to win the ACC, right? Or at least be very, very, they're competitive right now, but be dominant in the regular season and win the ACC. Jaden Daniels has just been is the Caleb Williams of the SEC. I don't know how else to put it. Like, just the defense isn't doing him any favors, and he's spectacular in a lot of ways. But all of these guys, I'm not saying there's not a path. I just think that, I personally would rather have Penix, Mike Penix, even Dylan Gabriel, and Caleb Williams is a better arm talent than any of those guys, at least. So yeah, any thoughts on any of their paths that you want to mention real quick?
No, you're absolutely right. I don't really see an SEC player that's standing out right now and being the top player in the country. Kind of going into this year, I think we all kind of agreed that the quarterback play was a down year without a doubt, and it's just gotten even worse. A lot of guys thought Will Rogers was the number one quarterback in the SEC. I don't know why, but that was kind of a general consensus, and he's played awful. Joe Milton has played pretty awful. Texas A&M, Connor Wegman got hurt, and he wasn't playing like a Heisman level. Jaden Daniels puts himself in tremendous positions to get hurt repeatedly throughout the year. So I really don't have confidence in him to make it throughout the season without picking up a knock that's going to put him out for a while. His inability to protect himself is low-key fun to watch and also highly frustrating at the same time. What are you doing trying to jump over 3 defenders? Like, what is he's Matt Corral, but a little bit skinnier and a little bit taller in terms of
I've never heard that analysis. I love that.
How he protects his body. And as you all remember, Matt Corral, Game Bird thought he was a linebacker, clearly was not. So that's how I feel about Jaden Daniels. I do want to say that if there is one player that could possibly etch out a spot in New York from the SEC, it's going to be Dijon. I can't say his first name. Dijon Edwards, the running back from Georgia, had a big year at Vanderbilt. Has quietly had a really good year. I think he's in
and
the
now
top
that Brock
5
Bowers is out, that makes sense. That
exactly.
Yeah,
They're gonna rely on him a lot more because Carson Beck is not a guy that's gonna. He's not gonna lose you games, but he's definitely not gonna win you games either. I think they're gonna rely on Edwards even more, and I think that we could see some really big stand-up performances from him as we move on later on throughout the year. And Georgia's gonna have some really tough games coming up. I think one of the games they play is against Ole Miss. So if Ole Miss comes out good and Ole Miss comes out firing, I think that was going to be Edwards' platform in order to give himself a ticket to New York.
Now I'll say one more thing, and I say this with absolutely no bias, right? So none at all. You can argue
here we go.
that the clearest path for a Heisman winner from the SEC, and it's muddled right now, but it's getting more open. And again, not saying it's gonna happen, but
better not say it. Better not say it.
Graham Mertz.
Oh my Lord.
Incredibly efficient. Has one of the best wide receivers in the country in Ricky Pearsall. Yes. Plays Georgia in the state of Florida, which automatically makes it a home game. He has FSU at home. Really, the toughest test is Death Valley. And man, we just said it, that LSU defense does not look that good. So I'm just saying the clearest path could be for Graham Mertz, especially now that the old ball coach said, throw the ball. I think we should air it out a little bit more. And Billy Napier seems to be taking that to heart and throwing the deep ball a little bit more. So I'm just saying his stats are better than Joe Burrow's first year when he transferred from Ohio State. That's all I'm saying. So,
Mertz has quietly had himself an impressive year, had a big game last week against South Carolina, 30 for 48, 423 yards and 3 touchdowns. He was my offensive player of the week. I know
on the road, on a double-digit comeback in the fourth quarter. I'm just saying.
Not an easy place to win at all, South Carolina.
Not in the sandstorm.
Nope. And I may have some bitter feelings regarding how much I hyped him up from his Wisconsin days and how wrong I was. But I think the problem for Graham Mertz, and he's going to find that real soon, is that his offensive line is questionable at best and awful at worst. And they're going to be playing some defensive lines that just love to whack quarterbacks. And though how much I love Ricky, how do you pronounce it?
Ricky Pearsall. Yeah.
Pearsall, thank you. Pearsall. Who has incredible hands, by the way. I remember that one-handed catch. I've been a fan of him the whole year, but that one-handed catch he made was incredible. ETN, obviously, I love his brother, and he is just like him in terms of playmaking skills. But defense, I got some major questions about. Offensive line, I got some questions about. Billy Napier, I got major questions about. But the most important part is, what is Florida's biggest win of the year? And that would have to be third week in September when you guys beat Tennessee in the Swamp. Is there anything that tells us Tennessee's good right now? I know the record is 5-1, but are they a really good football team? No, they're not. They're not. They got good running backs. They have an offensive system that can put up yardage. They're not a good football team.
If Tennessee, Florida was dominant in that game. So if Tennessee is a bad team, if Florida is a good team, they beat Tennessee like they should have, if that makes sense. If Florida is good and Tennessee is not as good, Florida took care of Tennessee like they should have. So that's all put there. It wasn't some, it should be a dominant victory at that point, right? So I will say, man, you've completely left out Montrell Johnson, who is every bit as good as ETN, just in a different fashion. And Eugene Wilson has been electric on the edge. A lot of these short passes and screens that they're getting to him. He just no one in the country by multiple players has as many true freshmen playing in every game as Florida does. I think they're averaging 11 a game, which is just ridiculous. So there's a lot of young talent. I believe only one senior starter right now. So it's a team that, of course, is going to take a lot of time to find their identity. And I think that South Carolina game really helped them start that. So obviously we have a big test, even with the Brock Bowers list, Georgia. But I'm just saying the path is there. The path is there. If Georgia doesn't know what to do without Brock Bowers, if LSU's defense is as bad as we say, and if the Swamp does its thing against Florida State, man, the path is there for Graham Mertz. So
the path is there. And the path is there for Florida to get into the college football playoff. As much as I don't like to say that, it's clear.
It's there.
However, even though I know it's gonna sound crazy, I am picking Florida to beat Georgia this week in an upset. I know. I also think that Florida loses against LSU. I think Florida loses against Florida State. And I do think that the Arkansas game is going to be a lot closer than you would like. I think you guys win that one.
Come
But
on,
the
with the
big,
black uniforms even? Come on.
I'm
First
sorry,
ever
but
blackout?
I know I'm sorry, but I also think you guys get boat race when you guys go up to Columbia, Missouri. All right.
If I had to, and this might make me look like an idiot in the future, man. So hopefully don't CC freezing cold takes. But the game that I'm like genuinely as a Florida fan most like, if I had to like put one L in pen, I even say on the road at Missouri. Like honestly, like that because Missouri's a good team, and
Good
that's
team.
a very underratedly difficult place to play sometimes. And so yeah, I'm that might be one of my biggest concerns. But
Yeah,
hey,
and I think if I look
throw
at the
like
schedule,
$5 on Graham Mertz to win the Heisman, and you'll
why not?
you can pay rent. So
Exactly.
yeah,
Why not? I mean, at least you have a clear way to
yeah,
do it. You know, unlike a lot of these other guys where there's so many things that can fall into place for them. If Mertz throws for 350 throughout the rest of the year, just hand it to him and then
yeah.
watch him scrub out in the NFL like every other Florida quarterback. But
My
you know, that's
gosh, man, that was cold. So yeah, geez. Okay, well, we'll move it. We'll move on.
moving on.
Do you want to do running backs now? Huh? Do
let's
you want to go over that one next?
let's do it, man.
We'll do we'll talk briefly about our performances of the week from last week. I'll start off with my offensive performance player. I don't know how you can go with anyone else other than this guy. Alec Ayomar, for the wide receiver from Stanford, had 15 receptions on the year until last Friday night against Colorado, where he went 13 receptions, just short of 300 yards, and another 3 touchdowns. I mean, everything you could want in this game. Set a school record for most receiving yards. He was responsible for probably the 2 most critical plays of the game, both the 97-yard touchdown that Dion even admitted that changed the course of that game, and then the catch where he just mossed Travis Hunter for a touchdown, and then at really any time that he was one-on-one on the outside and on the slot, they targeted him. Like he was the go-to receiver for the entirety of that game almost. He really made his money, it seemed like, on creating separation. But man, he had a few plays where he showed his physicality. And he showed his ability to maneuver in space and really find the soft spots whenever Colorado did move to zone coverage as well. So a little bit about him. One, he goes to Stanford, so pretty smart dude last I checked. Born in Canada, and he was actually ranked 8th nationally in the under 18 Canada 200 meter a couple years ago. So really shows that he has the speed to separate. He was a top 10 recruit in the state of Massachusetts. Like he was not a nobody unranked guy coming out of high school either. So Stanford has some talent on that edge, definitely led by Ayomar. So man, but what a heck of a performance with the spotlight on them too. If you had trouble getting to sleep that night, so
Yeah, I mean, okay, so I was watching the Taylor Swift movie while the game was going on
oh
because
my
I,
gosh,
I I I got dragged to it. The nice part was that I had to catch a little bit of the game because majority of the people in the audience were in the front of the movie screen dancing. So I kind of had I had a little Taylor Swift poster that held up, and I had my phone behind it so I could kind of catch it. So I thought Colorado was just gonna boat race them because I checked it was like 29-0. I was like, okay, never mind. Close my phone, watch Taylor Swift perform, exit the theater, go to dinner at kind of like a sports bar, and then I saw the comeback. His catch in overtime, I think over Travis Hunter,
yeah,
was just
incredible,
incredible.
yeah.
And not only did he catch it, like to catch it in stride while backpedaling and then fall into the end zone while maintaining possession. That is
Easily
that's the
the
stuff.
second best catch of the year. Like,
Yeah,
yeah,
easily. That's stuff you enter the portal and you get massive NIL deals if that's something that he ever considered doing.
yeah,
Like it was ridiculous, and I think that if you're looking at Stanford throughout the rest of the year, you gotta be like great performance. He's getting double covered by the whole
yeah.
entire team because I mean, who else does Stanford have to go to? Honestly, so I think that was Stanford's like second win of the year. Only other one be against Hawaii, which tears. My heart is so sad. Right? See, he's repping the Bows. Stanford lost to Sacramento State, just to kind of put that into example of how poor this Stanford team is. But when you have a guy like that, like, I mean, if I'm a Cal Golden Bear fan, I have to be kind of shaking in my boots right now because that's the only game that matters to Stanford for the rest of this year. And if you have you have a guy like that, I mean, kind of makes you shiver a little bit.
If I'm Cal, I'm like just like double the triple teaming him, like making him look like Calvin Johnson. Is like you're not gonna beat me with Iron Manor. Like you might beat me somewhere else, but it's not
Yeah,
gonna be with that guy. So
you also have to stack the box against EJ Smith, and then you gotta basically double team him, and hopefully Ben Yurosek doesn't go off.
yeah, yeah,
That's
that's all you gotta hope for.
all you can do. That's all you can do. But yeah, impressive performance from him. Um, what can you even say? Like the performances from the non-big brands in the Pac-12 this year have been very spotty, but when they do happen, they've been very impressive. Oregon State's Martinez, the running back, has had some really random impressive performances. Also, Jaden Ott for Cal has had some really impressive performances. Guys like him has had some impressive performances. Kyle Williams of Washington State has had some impressive performances. And I think that if you are a team that loves to do it, or you're a guy that loves NFL draft stuff, you really gotta start paying attention to some of these non-big branded schools as playmakers because they have studs across the board. Arizona has them, Washington State has them, Oregon State has them, Stanford has them. These guys are going to be major playmakers on Sunday. If you don't start paying attention to them now, you're just going to be kind of lost in the midst while everybody else is getting knowledge on you.
I'll give you a super quick hypothetical. If Lincoln
Yeah.
Riley and Caleb Williams transfer to Wazoo, are they the unanimous favorite like they were before in the preseason?
No. And the
Yeah.
reason why is because Washington State's defense has shown that they're unreliable. So to me, honestly, it's kind of like the same thing. If whether you go to Washington State or USC, I just think USC has better receivers and Washington State might have a better offensive line. Um, Lincoln Victor, Kyle Williams, and there's another guy that I can't think of his name right now. Watson, I think, or Nikhil Watson, who's a running back, are good, but they aren't game changing, and that's the problem. I say if you switch up the hypothetical, if you send Caleb Williams and Lincoln Riley to Arizona, I think Arizona is undefeated. I think if you send them to UCLA is undefeated. I think if you send them to Oregon State, Oregon State's number one team in the country. The problem is that these big branded teams have focused so much on offense outside of Oregon that their defenses have not been as good as they should. I can even say that about Washington as well, who I think also has an underrated defense. However, there's been some times where they've looked really suspect, and that's why I have major concerns about the Huskies entering this USC game in a couple of weeks. Because if Caleb Williams, I think they play the Coliseum. Caleb Williams in the Coliseum is a different animal, and we all know it.
Yeah.
That's why I think this Arizona State game is going to be so crucial because they're coming off an emotional win. Arizona State has a really good offensive coordinator, offensive mind, and they got like three quarterbacks who can really throw the ball. Rashada, Drew Pine, and then that dude that's been there for a while. I can't remember his last name right now. Like, if Washington doesn't take care of business early, I have them on upset alert from the Sun Devils as well. So, it's again we'll just have
Rashada is not a
to
joke,
see.
man. Like Rashada is not
Not a
that
joke.
up there. So
I mean, you know, because he was supposed to go to Florida. Like,
yeah,
obviously,
I
we all know
do.
what happened. We all know what happened with that. But even Drew Pine put it on against USC, and that other dude they should have beat Cal, Arizona State. So again, we'll just have to wait and see, and then it's gonna be really interesting to see how this all shakes up if the Pac-12 is able to get a team into the college football playoff. We'll get a little bit of a glimpse into seeing how Washington, Oregon, USC, and UCLA are going to assimilate when they go over to the Big Ten.
Absolutely, man. And the Pac-12 is what a finale that they're having for the last season as we know it. Did you have I just realized we talked about IU Manor and the Pac-12 that whole time. Did you have an offensive player as well that you wanted to run by real quick?
Oh, yeah, it was Grab Mertz. As
Okay.
mentioned earlier, 30, 48, 423 yards, passing, 3 touchdowns, comeback effort, hard place to play, South Carolina, against a team that is looking for something.
Yeah.
So they're looking for some reason to kind of like bring the fire back, and you shut it down really impressive performance by him. He's my offensive player of the week.
It was, in my opinion, as someone who's watched like pretty much every Florida game to some degree that I've been alive for. That was probably my favorite road win that we've had. Reminded me of a lot of 2019 Kentucky, when Felipe Franks got hurt, Kyle Trask stepped in. Kadarius Toney had the game-winning touchdown off of a jet sweep, and we had to come from behind in the fourth quarter, just like that one. The best road win. This is the best road win since 2020 at Ole Miss to open up the season in the COVID year, where Kyle Pitts had like 4 touchdowns, I think. But this was my personal favorite and the most impressive, as far as coming back from behind in a tough environment to play in, since 2019 Kentucky. Like it was a good win. So that has been my main concern for Billy, is playing on the road. We just have never seemed to been able to get ready for anywhere else other than the Swamp. And the fact that Florida did that in such a dominant fashion at the end, was very impressive. So as you know, Pete Thamel and Reese Davis say, they played with their food in the beginning and then took care of business at the end. So I'll start off with my defensive player, or my defensive performance of the week for last week. Colin Oliver, the linebacker from Oklahoma State. Man, 2.5 sacks, 2 PBUs, and a forced fumble in the upset against Kansas Saturday. This past year, he shifted from defensive line to linebacker, even though he had 11 sacks as a freshman as an edge rusher. So, and this past week, even further, he moved from weak side linebacker to right outside linebacker and just exploded. He's still a work in progress as far as like being in coverage and everything else, but OK State's defensive coordinator Brian Nardo really adjusted him to be more of the likes of Micah Parsons, where he's, yes, a linebacker and almost name only, but he's really going to be that pass rush specialist for OK State. It worked beautifully. He is explosive, dynamic, bendy. And personally, my favorite thing about Colin is that he steps up when the moment is at its largest, which is critical to have in quarterbacks and edge rushers. The last 2 drives of the game for Kansas was really when he was at his best, the culmination of which was a 4th down that Kansas had to go for, down 7 with 2 minutes left. Oliver got a PBU as a linebacker. It was great. And this isn't new either. Last year, he had a forced fumble on a critical 3rd and 13 in the Big 12 championship, or 2 years ago, I'm sorry, against Baylor. Obviously they ended up losing the game against Baylor, but their chance to win, according to ESPN's win probability predictor, went down 6%, just on that single forced fumble alone. Probably the biggest play he's ever had was when he sacked Caleb Williams in Bedlam on a 4th and 10 with 15 seconds left, where OU was down 4 and had to go for it. He had a game-sealing 4th down sack against Iowa State last year. Like, he always seems to be the guy that like no one can block when the moment is at its biggest. So Colin Oliver, man, a name to keep your eye on, and just a dominant force in the Big 12.
Yeah, and real quick before I go to my selection, I wrote an article that said it's time for Oklahoma State and Mike Gundy to divorce, and I still believe that. But ever since then, Mike Gundy has pulled off back-to-back impressive performances, beating Kansas State 2 weeks ago, Kansas last week, and who knows what's going to happen with the Cowboys from now on. But this is the last time they played Bedlam, I think, ever this year. So maybe there's something else in the water up in Stillwater. For my defensive player, I got to select Notre Dame's Xavier Watts. 6 tackles, 2 interceptions, completely changed the trajectory of that game. Essentially sealed the win for the Fighting Irish. I mean, he was just incredible. He was in the right positions to make plays. When the ball came his way, he made sure he secured it. Nothing more to say about that. Just well done from that young man.
Hey, nothing like a good old 2 interception performance to seal a game. So yeah, absolutely. We'll move on to our HBCU performances of the week. I'm going to go with AJ Gates, the running back from Alabama State, in a 24-19 road win against Jackson State to help them leap them in the SWAC East standings, by the way. He had 6 rushes for only 33 yards, 4 receptions for 41 yards and a touchdown, and then 2 kick returns for 55 yards, actually. The reason that I'm going with him, this was a game where the momentum felt like a seesaw, just going back and forth, a combined 6 turnovers and 21 penalties between the two teams. AJ Gates felt like one of the handful of consistent pieces in this game where Bama State relied on him for all 4 quarters. He had more receptions than all the other Bama State players combined, even though he's just a running back. And man, he performed when it mattered most. They won the game on defense, I would argue, for Bama State. 6.5 TFLs that the Hornets had, and they really controlled the trenches for the most part. But man, the bright spot of that offense was by far AJ Gates. And anytime you're on a running back by committee team like AJ Gates is, and you have a performance as important as his, deserves to be recognized. So great road win by Alabama State. And man, it was one that, again, there was no real momentum, no real dynamic, and he was just consistent. And that's what you ask for most in those types of games. So
Yeah, absolutely. And my guy for HBCU Player of the Week in a heartbreaking 41-38 loss to Edward Waters, I gotta go with my guy, wide receiver Antonio Meeks from Tuskegee. He had 9 receptions, 179 yards, and a touchdown. Dude was just incredible on the day, snatching balls from the sky, getting open all the time. Was really big for the quarterback, whose name I can't remember. I think the quarterback threw for over 350 yards on that day as well. I mean, when you can account for basically, I think, over 50% of your quarterback's total yardage, that's a big statement. So Antonio Meeks is my HBCU Player of the Week.
absolutely, man. Also love anytime that we can move on from like the SWAC and the MEAC, the 2 big conferences, and talk about little Tuskegee. So I love it, man. We'll go with our 3 games of the week to watch. I'll start off with my first one, Utah at USC. I've been very surprised at the fickleness of Utah's performances this year. They had a really strong start against Florida. Then they had a very non-convincing win against what's turned out to be a bad Baylor team. Then they held Chip Kelly's UCLA offense to 7 points, which is 18 points better than the next best defense that they faced. And then a double-digit loss to a good Oregon State team, but not an Oregon State team that should be beating Utah by 2 scores. So, and then for USC, they squeezed out shaky wins. Obviously, it all came crumbling down in South Bend. I think for both teams, this is like a true litmus test where I think USC has more to prove in this game. And then Utah has won the 2 previous Pac-12 championships. It's not like there's some underdog or some team that should be removed from consideration of winning it a 3rd time in a row like they seem to be for now. So again, I'm surprised at how inconsistent this team has been under Kyle Whittingham. Because he is like the definition of consistency. So it's surprising to me. That's not a knock on Whittingham. It's just it's something to note. And then for USC, it just has not been the fairy tale that we all thought it would be for Lincoln Riley's 2nd year. So very interested to see how this plays out.
Yeah, for Utah, it's been really interesting for them because when they were scheduled to play Florida, there was rumors that Cam Rising might possibly play in that game, and then it's been 8 weeks and we have yet to see it. I don't think he's going to be back this season. I think we could see him playing, I think, his 7th year of college football next year after he applies for a medical redshirt. But Utah defensively has one of the best defensive minds in the West Coast in Morgan Scalley. Whenever Scalley has stopped, making racially insensitive comments, he is one of the best coaches in all of college football. And the fact that he's been so successful these past 2 years since that incident, I think has secretly made Utah reinstate his head coach in waiting status in terms of when it comes to Kyle Whittingham. And his defense has absolutely messed up USC enough for Utah to get those 2 victories last year. However, I'm taking USC in that game for the pure fact that they can't get anything done offensively. it's just going to be really hard for Utah to be able to put up the necessary points to be able to overcome a USC offense that is desperate to get back on track. However, my game of the week is going to be Penn State visiting Ohio State. I think the Buckeyes win this in a close one. However, everyone right now is on Penn State's kind of wagon, and for good reason. Drew Aller is the best quarterback Penn State's ever had. Not in this century, not in 50 years. This is the best quarterback they ever had. He's better than Kerry Collins. I think Kerry Collins Penn State. He's better than Matt McGloin. He's better than Todd Blackledge. He's better than all those guys. Aller is the best quarterback in Penn State history, and he's like 20. His ability to not continuously throw the ball into triple coverage is the key to Penn State's success. They have two also really good running backs in Singleton and Allen. Chop Robinson kind of leads that really, really good Penn State defense. Manny Diaz has set himself up to get another head coaching opportunity. However, Ohio State is different when they play in the shoe. I think Marvin Harrison Jr. is going to be a little bit too much for them. I think McCord is going to be good enough. I think Jack Sawyer and GTT are going to be able to get enough pressure on Aller to force him to throw not interceptions, incompletions, and force Penn State to punt a lot more than they might be expecting. I do want to add real quick before we kind of go on that James Franklin in a press conference last week, at least before the UMass game, somebody asked a question. I forget the exact question, but basically he went off about,
You're making my skin crawl. Like
yeah. Thank you for helping me out, because my memory, based my CTE, was kind of acting up there. I couldn't remember exactly what was said, but I would like to add, I watched damn near 6 years of Trace McSorley and Sean Clifford put the ball into double coverage deep. So the reporter's question wasn't exactly out of line when you look at the grand scheme of things, especially when Trace McSorley literally threw away the Rose Bowl. So Drew Aller, well done to him, and James Franklin, maybe take a look at some of the tape from years past, because Sean Clifford, the greatest quarterback to always fail, without a doubt. So that's my big game for this week.
It's a pretty big one. But yeah, no, his comments on that were, oh my gosh, man. The reporter was not out of line at all. It just completely twisted the question to make it something that it wasn't. So
very, very not self-aware by James.
Yeah, no, not at all. Not at all. My next game of the week to watch, I'm gonna go with Clemson at Miami. The indictment on both of these teams is not necessarily their record, but how they got to what their record is. Clemson with a blowout loss to Duke on Labor Day, and then a loss to FSU, where maybe if you had a kicker, you'd win. For the Hurricanes, it was first the mistake in Miami, as Omar is calling it, and then a loss on Saturday Night Football to North Carolina, where from the top down, UNC just looked like the better team. I know in the first half, Miami looked competitive, but any momentum they had was lost after giving up 3 touchdowns in the third quarter. So for Mario Cristobal, this could be his first ACC win at Hard Rock Stadium. For Dabo Swinney, the last time Clemson started 4-3 was 2010. Which was Dabo's second year at Clemson. So more interested in the result of this matchup than the actual X's and O's of this game. But man, this is a game that has dire consequences for both sides if it's a loss. So interested to see how this one plays out.
Yeah, that's a great matchup. Clemson is getting criticized because of their success, and that's tough, because they're not a bad football team by any means. They had a really tough start to the season, which a lot of teams had, and they should have beat Florida State, as you mentioned, if they had a kicker, or maybe if Garrett Riley or Dabo Swinney didn't call a screen on 3rd and 2 in overtime, which was, or no, it was actually closer. It was wasn't it inches maybe? I forget what it was, but they should have ran the ball. Either way, those losses aren't as egregious as what Miami has done this year. Georgia Tech loss was one thing. It was an awful thing. But the North Carolina loss really highlighted the fact that Miami is no better than they were under Manny Diaz. When you bring in a guy like Mario Cristobal, you're expecting success to follow him. Why? I don't know. Because he underperformed at Oregon, and I don't think that's a stretch to say. I think when you look at what Justin Herbert has done, regardless of what happened on Monday night against Dallas, has done the NFL, and you look at what he did at Oregon, it's clear that what Mario Cristobal accomplished at Oregon was in spite of him, not because of him. And that's something that, I think we definitely got to take it to heart. And then, as you mentioned, he hasn't won a single ACC game at home yet. It's been, how many games has he played at home? Like 6 or 7 already?
Yeah,
Like,
a lot.
That's ridiculous. And then
And
you look
I
at
get that there's no home field advantage, but like, come on.
come on, like, you don't have to go anywhere. You just pull up. You pull up and you show out. A lot of teams don't have home field advantages, and they still get it done at home. His only 3 ACC wins, I believe, was at Virginia Tech, who had an awful year last year, who lost to Old Dominion last year, at Virginia, who was trash under Tony Elliott, and then at Georgia Tech, who was awful last year, who ended up firing the head coach. What about Mario Cristobal has made Miami fans think that he's the guy? If you look at his best year, which is 2019, where he won the Pac-12 and he also won the Rose Bowl, he lost to Arizona State. Well, he lost to Auburn and Bo Nix in a game they should have won. He lost to Arizona State in Tempe or Mesa, wherever they're located at, and a game that they definitely should have won. And then look at his 2 corners, Marcus Arroyo, who found out UNLV and no longer employed, Andy Avalos, who was up 30-10 against Colorado State with 5:45 minutes in the football game, and then lost. Like, what can you say? Like, oh, congratulations, you have Aaron Feld, who's one of the more notable strength conditioning coaches in the country. Well done. That's it. Miami is an absolute mess right now. They deserve everything that's happening to them, and you reap what you sow. And when you bring in a guy like Mario Cristobal, who doesn't understand the current landscape of college football, you got your offensive lineman on the sideline asking, "What are we doing?" From a guy was an offensive lineman, head coach himself. So, Miami is a mess. It makes me smile deeply on the inside. I think that the hire was awful. I think Miami, for the better part of a decade, has failed to understand exactly who they are. And the fact that they've only made one successful coaching hire since I started watching college football, which is 2007, and Mark Richt, is pretty damning from a program that used to be so good 20 years ago. My second game of the week is going to be Air Force and Navy. Air Force right now is undefeated at 5-0, I believe. They're in the top 25. Navy is 3-3. I believe they play this game in Texas at the Rangers Stadium, if I'm not mistaken. Could be wrong on that. But I think that this is basically, Navy has 2 Super Bowls coming up. This game and also Army. However, they've had a very underrated, I know I've been saying underrated this whole show, but they've had a very underrated season. They started out tough with Navy and Ireland, but since then they've gone 3-3. Where they sit now, they look offensively more innovative than they have in the past 15 years with their new head coach. And I think that Air Force should be on upset alert. I think this is going to be, again, another low-scoring game between the service academies, which I'm sure you and Omar have witnessed throughout your guys' entire life. But I think Air Force, even though I have Navy on upset alert, I think Air Force pulls this one out in like a 13-10 kind of matchup.
I can very much see that. I definitely have Air Force winning. The game is actually in Annapolis. I believe it's the Army Air Force game that's typically played at the Ranger Stadium. But yeah, and then obviously Army Navy neutral site. So which I did not know. I had to look it up. So still I think they get a road win. But yeah, Air Force is a legitimate team and has some New Year's Six hopes, as they should this year.
Yeah.
So my next game of the week to watch, I'm gonna go with Lafayette at Holy Cross. Holy Cross is 4-2, but the losses are to a good Harvard team and a Boston College, so they're still first in the Patriot League and not by any means having a bad season. Lafayette is not interested in a shootout. They're gonna come at you controlling the clock and playing great defense. Lafayette's running back Jamar Curtis is actually 6th in the FCS in yards per game, averaging 116. And then linebacker Billy Schaefer actually last week had 10 tackles and 3 TFLs against Princeton. So, and they also haven't committed a turnover in 3 games, which is impressive for almost anyone, much less Lafayette. So on the Holy Cross side, Crusaders have the best quarterback in the Patriot League by a mile, in my opinion, in Matt Shluka, the Zach Wilson of the Seven Hills. Omar's nickname for him. And they were in the FCS playoffs last year, so obviously coming off of a good year. They played last year a worse Lafayette team than this one, and they only won by 3 points, so we've seen that it can be close. For Holy Cross, they're defending their title of the Patriot League champions, and then for Lafayette, they've surpassed their win total from each of the past 13 years, I believe. So, or something like that. So they're playing with house money at this point. But yeah, man, that's I'm excited to see it. I could be wrong on that though. I'm not sure. I'd have to look it up. But yeah, Lafayette's having a good year.
Yeah, absolutely. And my game of the week, I got to go out to the Big Sky Conference, one of my favorite conferences. Two teams that have become quiet NFL production factories from that level, and that's Montana State versus Sacramento State. Both of these have sent two very impressive linebackers to the NFL these past couple of years. Troy Anderson from Montana State, and then Marte Mapu from Sacramento State. Both teams right now are 5-1. I think this is going to be a major game that's going to decide a conference, obviously playoff seeding for the FCS. Montana State has one really bad loss on the year, I believe it was to Cal Poly, but outside of that, they've won all the rest of their games by double digits. I think the shortest margin of victory for them was like 16 points. So outside of one really bad game against a team I can't remember, I don't think it was Cal Poly. I might have somebody else. But Montana State has looked very solid throughout the year. Sacramento State is 5-1. Their only loss is to Idaho, who beat Nevada this year, just to show how good Idaho is. Idaho's right now sits at 5-2. And honestly, Idaho should have beat Cal as well. Cal was awful in that game. It took a massive second half performance in order to sink the Idaho. Sacramento State defeated their old head coach Troy Taylor and Stanford this year. They've been pretty impressive throughout the year. Their only loss came after that Stanford game on the road in Idaho. So that's a really tough place to play as well, the QB Dome. So that game, I think, is going to have some major consequences in terms of, again, FCS playoff seeding and the Big Sky Conference, along with the fact that if you're looking for really good undrafted free agent gems, that game is going to be a great opportunity to watch some guys really ball out. Some really good athletes on both sides of the field.
I believe it's on ESPN too, right? Like it's something you can pretty easily watch, which is fun. So always love it when these smaller schools can just be, you can go to a Buffalo Wild Wings and watch this thing if you want to, man. You don't have to, log into ESPN Plus or stream the thing. So no, that's fun. Yes. But yeah, man, that's really it for me. Anything else you want to add before we hop off?
Nah, I know we've been on for a while, but I appreciate you let me back on the show. Yeah, every time I come on, I've always had a good time talking ball with you boys. Wish again Omar the best is whatever he's got to do for military. I mean, he always is one of the hardest workers I've ever seen, whether that be in his actual career or college football. He does everything. So just want to shout out to him. Want to shout out to you for bringing me on. Good luck to your Gators this week, and I appreciate everyone for watching.
Absolutely, man. Thank you. I know you're a busy guy, and I appreciate you coming on here. So. Thank you. If you've gotten to this point in the podcast, thank you for listening, and we will see you next week back with Omar.